Aviation Fin UK, runway 01, clear to take off.
Hello and welcome to another Aviation Sim UK video. So it's been a little bit of a while because we've all been in exams and stuff, but today's video is going to be on how to contact an approach unit when you're arriving at an airport, because it's one of the things that pilots commonly get wrong that we've observed, especially when they've been controlling airports like Gatwick and they don't include all of the information, or they don't include the information that we're asking them to do. So we thought we'd go through this all and kind of demystify some of it. So, the first thing you need to include when you're contacting an approach unit, to be honest, any unit, is your cleared level. Okay? Especially such when you're coming into an airport and talking to approach. So typically when you're speaking to en route, you'll be given descent clearance. Okay? So you'll be told, speed 123, descend flight level 80. Okay, and approach needs to verify this information on their flight strip, because en route might tell you to descend to flight level 80, but on their flight strip said you're descending flight level 100. And so this is just to prevent errors from happening. Okay, and this is different to your passing level. Okay, your mode, you report your passing level because we need to verify your mode Charlie. Okay, which is the altitude readout from your aircraft. Okay, and this has been done by another controller, and in the UK, the individual units don't have to verify your mode Charlie, but the first unit you talk to does, if that makes sense. So when you talk to en route for the first time, they will verify your mode Charlie, and then it's deemed verified for everyone else. Okay, so we as an approach unit, when you're being handed off to us, only care about what level are you descending to, not what level are you passing. Okay, so just remember there is a difference between the two, and that we want to know what one you're descending to. So the next bit of information you need to include is the aircraft type. Okay, this is so that we can verify what aircraft you're flying, so that we can have in our minds a rough idea of what speed you're going to be flying on final and what your wake turbulence category is. Okay, so I've departed out of Manchester before flying to Birmingham, and someone thought I was a 738 when I was a Cessna 172, and I made it very apparent I was a Cessna, but they weren't listening. And when they asked me to do 280 knots through the RMA, I kind of told them no, that I was a Cessna, and they were like, oh, it's wrong, and stuff like that. So be aware. Okay, the approach controller also needs to know your wake turbulence category, because if it's wrong, your aircraft can literally just fall out of the sky if you get too close to another aircraft. So for example, if you're a Cessna following an A380, it's highly unlikely because the A380 goes faster, obviously, but you know the Cessna is probably not going to make it for the best. Okay, so that's why we need to know about what your aircraft type is. We also need to know that you know the ATIS information. Okay, so we need to know that you know the up-to-date weather and airport information. Okay, and actually listen to it. Don't just sit there, open it up and go, oh, it's Bravo, and don't read the rest, because that's really frustrating as an approach controller, or as a controller in general, when you know there's stuff that's been put in the ATIS information on purpose and you don't know a clue about it. So the ATIS information will include a landing runway and usually the approach type to expect. So at Gatwick it will say that in the ATIS information that you will expect an ILS approach for like 08 right or 26 left. Okay, and that's why they are able to say it's landing 26 left and no delay, and not tell you expect a ILS approach 26 left. Okay, and you need to basically be aware of this, because it's really frustrating when you're on Gatwick and you tell a pilot landing 26 left no delay, and they go, what runway, or what approach type, and stuff like that, and you're like, it's in the ATIS information, like just listen to it type thing. Obviously we're friendly and we're like, we will tell you, but in the backs of our minds we're like, what is the point, like it's here type thing, and it is frustrating. So make sure that you are listening to the ATIS information, actually understand it. If you don't understand it, then just ask the controller, it's fine, we don't really mind, but make sure that you try and understand it type thing. You will also need to include other relevant information. So en route will sometimes tell you to do things like fly a heading or fly a certain speed, and the approach controller again needs to verify this information that's on their flight strips, so that we know that you're doing what we think you're doing, if that makes sense. Because we want to know if you're flying heading, if you've been told to fly heading 180 degrees, we want to know that you are doing that and you're not turning left randomly heading 045 or something like that. Okay, so just make sure that you're including this information as well. But the en route controller is very helpful. They will tell you to report your heading or report your speed or report your high speed to the controller. And the other bit of information you need to include is if you're going to request a non-standard approach for any reason, we don't mind as an approach controller if you try and make a request. You might get denied due to controller workload, but you need to do this on first contact, okay? Do not expect the approach controller to guess that you want a non-standard approach, okay? It's a bit too late when we say cleared ILS approach. The next transmission from you is, but I want an RMP. It's not very good, and you will start to annoy the approach controller because he then can't clear you for an approach probably and stuff like that. Okay, and it's just annoying when we tell you things like it's Vector's ILS approach 27, and then you go, oh, but I want an NDB DME approach for 27 or something like that, and that's kind of annoying as well. So if you want a non-standard approach, request it in your first transmission as well at the end, so you give all of your information, as we'll see in the examples, and add to the end of that requesting an RMP approach or requesting an NDB VOR DME approach or whatever type of approach you want, and usually the controller will accept it, but just do it at the first transmission. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at some examples of how to actually contact an approach unit. So this first example is when you're on your own navigation, and we'll kind of split the first one up, and then we won't split the other ones up because I'll just tell you what information's added. Okay, so this is when en route hasn't told you to fly heading or speeds. This is just where you're on your own navigation, so you're just flying the aircraft on the autopilot as your route said, and you've got no speed restrictions. Okay, so all you have to say is go direct to good evening or morning, afternoon, Tomcat 4575, descending flight level 80, type Boeing 787-800, information alpha. Okay, so if obviously get direct as the person we're speaking to. The good evening bit you don't have to say, but it's nice, makes the controller feel all happy inside. Okay, your call sign, your cleared level, so what level you're descending to, your aircraft type, so 787-800, and the latest information that you've got on board. Okay, so if your en route controller puts you on a speed restriction, he will tell you to report your speed. Okay, so it's the same as normal. Get direct to good evening, Tomjet 4575, descending flight level 80, type 787-800, information alpha, speed 270 knots. So as the approach controller, that tells me you are going to be flying 270 knots, and I need to probably think about slowing you down. Oh. Otherwise, 270 knots on the ILS probably won't work. Okay. If your speed, if you get told by the en route controller speed 270 knots or greater, then say that, okay? Don't tell me that your speed is 292 knots, because I want to know what the speed restriction that you've been given is, okay? Because you can go from 292 knots all the way down to 270 knots without me knowing, okay? And that's why we need to know the actual speed restriction you're going to be flying. So you've got 270 knots or greater, or 270 knots or less, okay? And that's important to say, okay? Just on a side note as well, if you are doing 290 knots and the approach controller tells you speed 270 knots or greater, please do not try and answer the controller back by acting clever and going, I'm already doing 290 knots. I know that. I just want to make sure that you don't go below 270 knots or whatever the speed restriction is, because there's likely an aircraft behind you, and this happens so frequently when you're controlling and you'd be like speed 270 knots or greater, you'll be like, but I'm doing 290. It's like, I know, but I need to stop you from slowing down and crashing into someone. So you also have someone else crash into you type thing. So yeah, don't be sarky about those things. This is really annoying. The last instruction that approach can tell you is report your heading. Okay, so go direct to good evening, Tomjet 4575, descending flight level 80, type 787-800, information alpha, heading 090 degrees. Again, the controller needs to verify this information on their flight strip that you are flying 090 degrees, because the en route controller might have told you to resume main navigation or something like that. So we're just verifying this information to make sure that nothing crazy happens, basically. And all of that information basically concludes how to speak to an approach unit on first contact. Hopefully we'll do another video on what the approach unit will actually tell you and what all of that means. But If you have any questions or anything, then feel free to submit a ticket to helpdesk.aviationsim.co.uk, or go onto our forums on the website and ask questions. There's loads of us that are willing to answer questions for you, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. And if you've liked this video, then remember to like and subscribe as well, because it makes all the difference to all of the team here. And remember to aviate, navigate, and communicate. Take care and see you for the next video.